Hi, Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera to all my students watching this video. So today I would like to discuss on the part of chapter 2, which is law as a rule, but I only discuss on the last part of this chapter, which is the differences between the legal rules and social rules. Before I move to our main discussion, I would like to highlight the learning outcomes for this video. The student must be able to determine the differences between the social rules and the legal rules at the end of this video. Reminder for all my students here, if you can't understand, please ask the questions to me. And if you need me to explain again, please ask me to do so in the class. Or you can drop any question in the comment section and I will answer it. Before we go to our main discussion, I would like to give you an overview what is actually a social control, the legal rules, and also a social rule. Social control refers to the way members of society maintain order and promote the predictability of behavior, meaning to say the social control is the way in order to regulate the conduct of members of society. So how we want to control the society, how we want to regulate the society? It is by way of legal rules and social rules. The legal rule is a formal rules like a law that we have today. So that is the legal rules. While the social rule is other than the law. Okay, for example, the social values like religion, moral, ethic, custom, fashion, and taboo. So this is actually the example of the social rules that needed in order to control or regulate the conduct of society. So we move to our main discussion. Okay, which are the differences between the legal rules and social rules. They are main point in order to differentiate between both, okay, in terms of enforcement, validity, compliance, sanction, and dispute settlement. So we will look one by one, okay, the differences between them. Number one is in terms of enforcement. So what is enforcement? Enforcement is the execution. Okay, execution of the process of in order to ensuring the compliance of the rules. Okay, so that is enforcement. How we want to enforce the social rules and how we want to enforce the legal rules. For the social rules, it is informal form of control. It is not exercised by any official institution and it doesn't have any special designated person to be appointed in order to enforce the social rules. Okay, meaning to say no official institution, no person to enforce it. And under a social rule, the technique that people usually use to enforce the social rule is by the way of praise to those who meet their expectation and show a displeasure to those who do not. So we can say that under a social rule, it's just informal enforcement. Okay, while the legal rules, okay, it is a formal form of social control. It involves the institution or legal institution and the person who appointed in order to enforce a legal rule or the law itself. For example, formal criminal justice system, we're having the statute, we're having the police officer, we're having a court, we're having a prison in order to enforce the legal rules. So we can say here, under the enforcement, social rule doesn't have any formal enforcer, while the legal rules having a formal enforcer, okay, in order to enforce the social and also the legal rules. Next, we will move to the validity part. We need to understand what is the meaning of validity first. Okay, validity is the state of being legally or officially binding or acceptable. Okay, how we want to determine the rules is valid or not. Okay, under a social rule, the rule is still valid because the social rules are informal and unofficial and it just made by a deliberate act. For example, the sports rules, the rules of etiquette, the rules of games. Okay, while the legal rules is a formal or official form of social control. Okay, whereby under a legal rules, in order to determine the validity of the law is by the way of lawmaking process. Okay, they need to go or follow a certain procedure in order to determine the law or legal rule is valid or not. Okay, under Martin Golding, who is one of the scholars, said that the law is distinguished from other rules such as sports rules, moral, in terms of its criteria of its validity. Okay, I could say that the main differences, how we want to differentiate between the social rule and legal rule is by the way of validity. Okay, because of the law is official form of social control. And it is agreed by Hart, Herschel Hart, that he said that the legal rules are different as they made by a legislation. Okay, when we want to determine whether the law is valid or not, okay, the legal rules is made by the person who having the power in order to enact the law, like for example, the parliament or legislator. Okay, and Austen also agreed with the Herschel Hart because he said that the hallmark of the law is the manner of its creation. Okay, the important characteristic of the law is how it is created. So we could say that the lawmaking process is the official one compared to other social rules, as the law need to undergo a several or formal legislative process in order to render it valid. So in order to sum up as regard to the validity point is social rule doesn't have any procedure in order to validate the rules. Okay, it's still valid because it's just informal and unofficial rules. While the legal rules, in order to render it valid or not, it need to go to a formal legislative process. So we move to the next point, which is a compliance. So what is a compliance? Okay, the compliance is the act of obeying a rule. Okay, what is the reason that you comply with the rules? Okay, under a social rule, okay, people obey or comply with the rules because of the internal control. So what is the internal control? Internal control is complies to social norm as a result of internalization. Okay, what is internalization? Internalization is you obey the law, you obey the rules, you obey the rules because of it is a part of yourself. Okay, and the most effective agency that influence the socialization of the individual of family, school, a peer groups, religion, or a mass media. So meaning to say that the people or society follow the social rules because of the internal control, okay, in the consequences of the socialization, okay, because of the society, because of the given social group that they have. Okay, so that means by the internalization, socialization, and internal control. While the legal rules, they comply with the legal rules because of external pressure. What is external pressure? External pressure is because of fear of sanction. Okay, it can be exercised by the state or non-state institution like a professional body, schools, labor union, and this institution having an authority in order to make rules and order to ensure the compliance by use of sanction. Okay, so meaning to say in terms of compliance, social rules, they obey the law or comply with the rules, because of the internalization or internal control, while the legal rules is because of the external pressure of external control. So the next point is in terms of sanction. So what is actually the meaning of sanction? Sanction is punishment. When you disobey or when you did not follow the social rules or the legal rules, what would be the sanction behind it? Okay, we look on the social rules first. For the social rules, it is informal sanction and unorganized sanction. Okay, meaning to say it is in terms of social repercussion. Okay, it doesn't involve any penal punishment. Okay, it's just a social repercussion. For example, it depends on the society like praise, gossip, ridicule, shaming, and criticism. So that is a social repercussion. Okay, and it agreed by Max Weber. He said that a deviation from social rules are not met by a strong sanction, instead by disapproval by the people. So when you did not follow some of the social rule, okay, the sanction is it just disapproval by the people, okay, not in terms of penal punishment. Okay, it can be compared with the legal rules. The legal rule is having a formal sanction, okay, penal or restitutive punishments because it is already incorporated in the statute and having the force of law. Like for example, the imprisonment, whipping, penalty, okay, fine or penalty. So that is actually the sanctions under the legal rule. So we can say here that we can conclude under a section, social rule is having the informal sanction, okay, like the social repercussions only. Okay, while the legal rule is having a formal sanction, okay, in terms of penal or restitutive punishment. And the last difference between social rules and the legal rules is in terms of dispute settlement. So what is a dispute settlement? Dispute settlement is a way or a method in order to solve any issues or problem arises, okay, or to settle the issues happen. So when someone did not follow a social rules or disobey the legal rules, okay, and when there's a dispute happen, okay, how we want to settle the dispute? So we look on social rules first. Social rules having the informal mode of dispute settlement through non-legal means. So meaning to say that when there is a dispute or issues happen under the society, in the society, okay, they did not go to the court in order to settle the dispute. The society have developed their own mechanism for dealing with the dispute. Okay, for example, Robert Simmons said that informal method of dispute settlement may include the use of physical force, resort to supernatural, and self-help. Okay, for example, supernatural is by using a magic or a mystic, or resort to or self-help. Self-help is when a person using their own action to correct the situations, like avoiding, okay, shaming, or ridiculing. Okay, for example, when someone hit or bump you by accident without say sorry, okay, so the how you want to settle the dispute is by self-help. For example, you avoid that particular person, you critique the action. Okay, so that is by the way of dispute settlement under a social rules. And for the legal rule is clear. We're having the legal proceeding in order to settle the dispute. When you having the dispute, you go to the court in order to settle it. But you need to know that under a legal proceeding, we're having a judicial and non-judicial method. Okay, judicial means that the court proceeding by a judge. You go to the court and the judge will settle it by give a decision. Okay, while we're having a second method, which is non-judicial, or we call it as alternative dispute resolution, or ADR. Okay, for example, we're having conciliations, mediation, arbitration. So those is actually the method in order to settle the dispute outside the court. Okay, so that is the legal rules. Okay, we can say that we can conclude on this particular part for the dispute settlement. Social rule, it does settle the dispute through non-legal means. By the legal rules, okay, settle the dispute by the legal proceeding or formal legal proceeding. And I think that's it for the differences between the legal rules and social rules. And I really hope that you can understand it. And just to sum up again, there are 5 differences between the legal rules and social rule in terms of enforcement: validity, compliance, sanction, and also dispute settlement. In terms of enforcement, social rule doesn't have any legal institution or a specific enforcer, okay, in order to enforce the social rule, while the legal rules, we're having the legal institution and the person who designed to enforce the legal rules. In terms of validity, social rule is still valid because it is an official rules. Okay, while for the legal rules, in order to render it valid, okay, the law need to go to the lawmaking process. Okay, number 3 is compliance. Okay, for the social rules, okay, people or society comply with the social rule because of internal control. Okay, while for the legal rules, because of external pressure of external control. And number 4 is sanction. Okay, for the social rule, the sanctions on the social repercussion. Okay, while sanction for legal rules is in terms of penal and restitutive punishment. And the last one is dispute settlement. For the social rules, okay, it depends on the society, because the society will think what would best mechanism in order to settle the dispute. While for the legal rules, we're having the legal proceeding in order to settle the dispute. Okay, I think that's all for this video, and I really hope that you can understand the differences between the legal rules and social rule. And if you can't understand, please ask me the questions. And if you need me to repeat it again, please ask me in the class. Okay, so that's all for this video. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And Assalamualaikum.